All right, we're watching what is this? History facts too funny for history books, all right? And we're starting in the 1800s. Let's run it.
While studying at Cambridge University, the poet Lord Byron was told
Hold on. Hold on.
dogs were strictly banned. While studying at Cambridge University, the poet Lord Byron
Is it good volume? I think it's good volume.
was told dogs were strictly banned. To protest, he bought a tame bear, brought it to his dorm, and argued there was no specific rule against bears. The college had to let him keep it. Viking explorer Eric the Red wanted to attract settlers to a frozen, icy wasteland, so he falsely named it Greenland. Of course, this is still its current name.
Oh.
Dozens of nobles gathered in a church in Erfurt.
Wait.
Wanted to attract settlers to a tame bear.
It's real? I thought it was. I'm gonna lose my mind over this.
Brought it to his dorm and argued there was no specific rule against bears. The college had to let him keep it. Viking explorer Eric the Red wanted to attract settlers to a frozen, icy wasteland, so he falsely named it Greenland. Of course, this is still its current name.
So Greenland is icy. I'm gonna lose my mind over this. So I just thought, when I first was told about it, it was like, okay, Iceland actually has grass on it. Greenland has ice on it. It's a practical joke. They switched them. And then I grew up and like, that's actually false. And it's real? What is happening? I don't know.
Dozens of nobles gathered in a church in Erfurt, Germany. The wooden floor collapsed under their combined weight, dropping them into the massive monastery cesspool below, where about 60 of them drowned in liquid excrement.
They fell through the floor into sewage? That's hilarious.
According to an old tale, the ancient Greek playwright Aeschylus supposedly died when an eagle mistook his bald head for a rock and dropped a tortoise on it to crack the shell.
Wait, what? Okay, that's kind of funny. Actually, it's not because he died, but it's kind of funny.
The BBC broadcast a documentary on April Fool's Day showing a family in Switzerland harvesting spaghetti from trees. Hundreds of people called in asking how to grow their own spaghetti tree. Idaho had a problem with
Okay. BBC out here, real prankster.
overpopulation of beavers in some areas. The government's solution was to put the beavers in specially designed wooden boxes, attach them to parachutes, and drop them out of airplanes into the wilderness. In Olympia Springs, Kentucky, chunks of red meat rained down from the sky for several minutes. 2 locals tasted it and said it tasted like mutton. Unluckily for them, the likely cause was a flock of vultures projectile vomiting mid-flight. Andrew Jackson,
So, like, it rained meat, and like, oh, this is okay.
when a 45-foot dead whale in 2008 and inspects the troops.
So this penguin is more important than me? What the hell? To be fair, like stop signs have more power than the normal person too. I don't like what I'm seeing over on I don't like what I'm seeing over there. I should ignore it. I shouldn't ignore it, but I'm gonna ignore it and let the stream figure itself out. All right. Unless I'm losing Wi-Fi, that tends to happen sometimes. I'm not. Okay. Keep going, I guess.
Whenever they visit Scotland. When a 45-foot dead whale washed up on a beach, Oregon officials decided the best way to dispose of it was to blow it up with a half-ton of dynamite. It rained massive chunks of rotting whale blubber onto spectators and crushed a nearby car. John Lee, an Englishman convicted of murder, was sentenced to hang. They tried to execute him 3 separate times, but the trapdoor mechanism jammed every single time. His sentence was reduced to life, and he was eventually released. A war between the Netherlands and the Isles of Scilly lasted for 335 years because they simply forgot to declare peace. There was never a single shot fired or a single casualty. The Youth International Party, known as Yippies, protested the U.S. presidential election by officially nominating a 145-pound pig named Pegasus the Immortal for president. The pig was immediately arrested by Chicago police. Allegedly, Caligula, the Roman emperor, marched his army to the beach, commanded them to attack the ocean with their swords, and had them collect seashells as the prize for his victory over the sea god. When William the Conqueror died, he was too fat to fit in his stone coffin. Priests tried to force his body in, causing his swollen bowels to burst and spraying the mourners with putrid remains. A riot broke out in Panama City after an American got drunk and refused to pay a local vendor 10 cents for a slice of watermelon. It escalated into a massive fight resulting in 17 deaths and the U.S. military getting involved. There's a war called the Kettle War, and it's a brief war between the Holy Roman Empire and the Republic of the Seven United Netherlands. Only a single shot was fired, which managed to hit and destroy a soup kettle. Fidel Castro was so obsessed with milk that he spent millions trying to create a super cow. He succeeded with Ubra Blanca, a cow that produced so much milk it broke the Guinness World Record, and Castro built a marble statue of her when she died. The Soviet Union wanted Pepsi, but couldn't pay with money, so they traded 17 submarines, a cruiser, a frigate, and a destroyer in exchange for soda. For a brief moment, Pepsi had one of the largest navies in the world. On April Fool's Day, Burger King announced a new burger designed specifically for left-handed people, where all the condiments were rotated 180 degrees. Thousands of customers actually went to stores requesting it. The treadmill wasn't invented for fitness. It was invented by a British engineer as a brutal torture device to punish prisoners by making them walk endlessly to grind grain or pump water. The Australian military deployed soldiers with machine...
Wait. That's what I'm gonna say every time I go to the gym. People are like, you're not getting a treadmill? No, that's a torture device. How about dumb apples? Huh? Okay, I want stream to like figure itself out because I don't want to have any issues when I'm playing the Trees Hate You demo. All right, let's lock in, please. I don't know what's going on. I don't like it. We look good on my phone, but it's still saying unstable, even though it's a good spot. Oh, we're good. I just had to click on it. Okay, never mind. I'm tripping off over nothing. Sorry.
Guns to fight a massive flock of emus that were eating crops. The emus outmaneuvered the soldiers, and the birds essentially won the war. Joshua Norton, a bankrupt businessman, declared himself Emperor of the United States in San Francisco. Instead of arresting him, the city played along. Cops saluted him, and restaurants accepted his custom-printed currency. The Austrian army got drunk on schnapps, started arguing amongst themselves, hallucinated an Ottoman attack, and fought an entire battle against themselves. Many were killed or wounded before they realized the enemy wasn't even there. There's a war known as the Pig War, and it's a conflict between the US and the British Empire over the boundary of the San Juan Islands. The only casualty of the entire war was a British pig that was caught eating an American farmer's potatoes. The Polish army adopted an orphaned bear cub, eventually enlisting him as a private so he could travel on a British transport ship. They called him Wojtek. He drank beer, smoked cigarettes, and helped carry heavy artillery shells during the Battle of Monte Cassino. Pope Stephen VI hated his predecessor, Pope Formosus, so much that he had Formosus's rotting corpse dug up, dressed in papal robes, propped on a throne, and put on trial. The corpse was found guilty. The CIA spent millions.
Wait, what the hell? Is that like the only trial in history that involved a dead man? What the fuck?
Surgically implanting microphones and transmitters into cats to spy on the Soviets. The first cat deployed was almost immediately run over by a taxi. When a storm destroyed the pontoon bridges King Xerxes built to cross the Hellespont, he ordered the sea to be whipped 300 times and had red-hot iron fetters thrown into the water to punish it. The town of Sunol, California.
Hold on. Run that back. What just happened?
The first cat deployed was almost immediately run over by a taxi. When a storm destroyed the pontoon bridges King Xerxes built to cross the Hellespont, he ordered the sea to be whipped 300 times and had red-hot iron fetters thrown into the water to punish it.
What the hell?
The town of Sunol, California, elected a black Labrador Rottweiler mix named Bosco as their honorary mayor. He served for 13 years, and his campaign promise was a bone in every dish. A ginger cat named Stubbs was elected honorary mayor of Talkeetna, Alaska. He served for 20 years, mostly drinking water out of a margarita glass at the local general store. The River Thames in England became so overloaded with raw human sewage that the stench literally shut down Parliament. Politicians tried soaking the curtains in chloride of lime to hide the smell before finally agreeing to build a modern sewer system. A massive storage tank burst.
So, like, they invented sewage because it overran like the Thames or whatever, and they couldn't have political discussions. That's hilarious.
In Boston, releasing 2.3 million gallons of molasses in a 15-foot wave that traveled at 35 miles per hour, destroying buildings and killing 21 people. Locals say you can still smell molasses on hot days.
What is molasses? Am I stupid? Do I know what that is? Let's look it up. Molasses. You make a cookie out of it. Molasses is a substitute for sugar. Okay. Okay. No, I know. My fault.
The King of Sweden, King Adolf Frederick, famously ate himself to death. After a massive meal of lobster, caviar, sauerkraut, and champagne, he ate 14 servings of his favorite dessert, semla, which consists of sweet rolls and hot milk, and died of severe digestive problems. The astronomer Tycho Brahe attended a royal banquet and held his pee for so long out of politeness that his bladder supposedly ruptured, leading to a fatal infection. During the U.S. Civil War, Union General Sedgwick was scolding his men for dodging Confederate sniper fire, famously saying, "They couldn't hit an elephant at this distance," moments before being shot directly below the left eye. Franz Reichelt invented a wearable parachute suit. To prove it worked, he invited the press to watch him jump off the Eiffel Tower. It did not work. Taco Bell took out full-page newspaper ads announcing they had purchased the Liberty Bell to help the national debt, renaming it the Taco Liberty Bell. Thousands of furious Americans called to complain before Taco Bell admitted it was an April Fool's joke. Two young girls used cardboard cutouts of fairies and a camera to create proof that fairies existed. The author of Sherlock Holmes, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, totally fell for it and wrote articles defending the fairies' existence.
Oh, what the hell? You're supposed to be smart, dude. Okay, the author behind Sherlock Holmes is not smart.
The U.S. military created a top-secret unit composed of artists, actors, and sound engineers. They used inflatable tanks, fake radio transmissions, and massive loudspeakers playing the sounds of marching troops to completely fool the German army. The Soviets trained dogs with explosives strapped to them to run under German tanks. However, because the dogs were trained on still Soviet tanks, in battle, they often panicked at the noise and ran under the Soviets' own tanks. B.F. Skinner developed a missile guidance system for the U.S. military that was controlled by 3 pigeons sitting in the nose cone, pecking at a screen to steer the bomb. It worked in testing, but was deemed too weird to use. The U.S. military attached tiny incendiary bombs to Mexican free-tailed bats. The plan was to release them over Japanese cities, where they would go in wooden buildings and burn them down. The project was scrapped after the bats accidentally burned down the U.S. military base they were testing them on. A French cavalry regiment managed to capture 14 Dutch warships without a naval battle because the sea had frozen solid. The cavalry literally rode their horses across the ice and surrounded the trapped ships.
That's hilarious.
A giant tank of dark beer burst at a London brewery, sending out a 320,000-gallon wave that smashed 2 homes, flooded the streets, and killed 8 people. When Plato defined a human as a featherless biped, Diogenes plucked a chicken, burst into Plato's academy, and shouted, "Behold, Plato's man." A man buried a 10-foot-tall stone statue he had carved in New York and charged people to see what they thought was the petrified giant. P.T. Barnum wanted to rent it, but was rejected, so he built a fake of the fake, and soon people were paying to see Barnum's fake more than the original. An Italian handyman simply hid in a broom closet at the Louvre, waited for the museum to close, took the Mona Lisa off the wall, hid it under his smock, and walked out the front door. The Swedish king Gustavus Adolphus wanted on his new war.
They just let the Mona Lisa get stolen like that? That's crazy. Okay, what's this?
Warship a second tier of heavy cannons. As soon as it launched in front of a massive crowd, a light breeze blew it over, and it sank less than a mile from the dock. Britain invaded neutral Iceland during World War II to prevent Germany from taking it. The invasion, however, simply consisted of soldiers politely asking the local police to step aside. The police chief told the British, "Please wait, we are neutral," but they all ended up having a pleasant chat. An English woman convinced top doctors that she was giving birth to rabbits. The king's own surgeon investigated and was fooled. Before it was discovered, she was just manually inserting the dead rabbits into herself beforehand. A volcanic eruption in Indonesia.
That's not even funny. That's just disturbing. What the hell?
blocked out the sun globally. A group of friends vacationing in Switzerland were stuck indoors due to the awful weather, got bored, had a ghost story contest, and Mary Shelley ended up writing Frankenstein.
Wait. That's how Frankenstein got written? It's kind of dope, actually. I like that one.
CIA wanted to dust Fidel Castro's shoes with thallium salts, so his famous beard would fall out and ruin his image. As a protest against political corruption, students in Sao Paulo, Brazil, campaigned for a zoo rhinoceros named Cacareco to win a city council seat. The rhino actually won with over 100,000 votes. Electoral officials didn't accept her candidacy, so the council seats went to human candidates. A crested macaque monkey grabbed a nature photographer's camera and took a smiling selfie. A massive legal battle. Macaque monkey grabbed a nature photographer's camera and took a
I've seen this picture before, so this is where it's from. Okay.
Smiling selfie. A massive legal battle ensued over who owned the copyright, the photographer or the monkey. The U.S. Copyright Office ruled animals can't own copyrights. To protect Paris from nighttime German bombing raids, the French government secretly built a massive fake Paris on the city's outskirts, complete with replica streets, fake trains, and lighting designed to look like a bustling city. The British developed a plan to drop millions of linseed cakes infected with anthrax over Germany to wipe out their cattle and starve the population. They tested it on Grunard Island, which remained so contaminated it couldn't be visited for 50 years.
Dude, wars back then were fucking crazy, dude. What the hell are we starving their whole population? These some devious motherfuckers.
Mechanics dug up Charlie Chaplin's body from a Swiss cemetery and held it for ransom. Chaplin's widow refused to pay, saying, "Charlie would have thought it rather ridiculous. The thieves were easily caught." In Nottingham, England, anger over the rising price of cheese led to a full-scale riot. Hundreds of people looted the market, using giant wheels of cheese as bowling balls to knock over the mayor and the police. The state of Ohio and the territory of Michigan went to war over a tiny strip of land called the Toledo Strip.
Oh, I do know about this, because I live in Michigan.
The only casualty was a Michigan sheriff who got stabbed in the leg with a penknife in a tavern brawl. Michigan lost Toledo, but was...
Damn. We could have had Toledo, man. That's fucked up. Give us Toledo. Should we go to war again for Toledo? Retry.
Given the entire Upper Peninsula as a consolation prize.
Oh, okay.
If you want to discuss this video or suggest an idea for the next one, join my Discord. Link in the description.
Alright, next one. Craziest discoveries that proved historians wrong.
Not only humans reached the Stone Age. For a very long time, historians and scientists believed that only humans and our extinct relatives were smart enough to pick up rocks to create tools, thus entering the Stone Age. However, an incredible discovery changed this old way of thinking. Very recently, researchers digging in Brazil and Thailand found buried, shaped stones that looked exactly like ancient human tools. However, there was a catch. These tools were not made by early humans. Instead, they were crafted by capuchin and macaque monkeys. Archaeologists discovered that these monkeys have actually been living in their own Stone Age for at least 3,000 years. They carefully chose heavy, round stones to act as hammers and flat stones to serve as anvils, or hard base surfaces to process their food. The monkeys taught this skill to their babies. We know this because not only did the tools have pounding marks and crushed edges that exactly matched how modern monkeys bash open hard cashew nuts today, but researchers also discovered these buried tools right under the same trees where monkeys still gather to eat right now. By digging down layer by layer into the dirt, scientists could trace a clear history of monkeys dropping these exact same types of rocks in the exact same spots for thousands of years. They even found ancient dust from the nuts on the oldest rocks. We still see these behaviors in today's monkeys. The Tripilia megasites. When we learn about the first huge human cities, the focus is almost always on Mesopotamia. That entire timeline shifted when old Soviet military photos taken from airplanes revealed strange circular patterns on the ground in Ukraine and Moldova. Modern scientists followed up using special tools that scan the magnetic fields of the Earth to see what was buried underneath the soil without digging. They uncovered massive settlements known as the Cucuteni Tripilia megasites. These sites contained thousands of homes arranged in giant rings and held up to 21,000 people at once. Because these bustling settlements were thriving as early as 4000 BC, we now know that huge urban societies existed in Eastern Europe hundreds of years before the famous cities in Mesopotamia.
Yeah, Mesopotamia got shit on Tripilia. Yeah.
The 30-year-old average. It is very common to hear that ancient people rarely lived past their 30s. People
Mm-hmm.
often picture life before modern medicine as so harsh that a 35-year-old was considered a frail elder at the end of their life. This idea started to crumble in 2018 when a scientist named Christine Cave looked closely at skeletons from Old English graveyards. She created a new way to study how teeth wear down over time to figure out the true age of these older bones. This new method confirmed that the famous statistic saying average life expectancy was 30 is actually a massive math trick caused by very high baby death rates. Because so many infants did not survive, the overall mathematical average dropped dramatically. However, Cave proved that if an ancient person made it past childhood sicknesses, they were likely to live to be around 70 years old. It turns out the ancient world was filled with healthy grandparents. The unknown human race. When mapping out the...
Wait. Unknown human race? What are we talking about right now? There's a different human race? What's going on? Sorry, I'm writing a message. Okay. Sorry. Okay. Alright, unknown human race. What's this about?
Ancient human family tree in Europe and Asia, experts used to think only two main groups existed during the late Ice Age: modern humans and Neanderthals. That entire picture changed in 2010 because of a tiny piece of bone no bigger than a pebble. Scientists working in a Siberian cave found a small pinky finger bone and managed to pull out its DNA. To their absolute shock, the genetic code did not match humans, and it did not match Neanderthals. It belonged to a completely unknown group of ancient relatives we now call the Denisovans. This proved that a mysterious third group was wandering the ancient world and even having children with our direct ancestors. In fact, this tiny bone revealed that Denisovan traits were passed down through the generations and still survive today in modern people living in areas like Tibet and Melanesia. The manhunter. For decades, everyone thought that prehistoric men went out to hunt large animals, while women stayed close to camp to gather plants. In 2020, archaeologists digging high up in the Andes Mountains of Peru found a grave from 9,000 years ago. Inside was a skeleton buried alongside an impressive set of hunting gear. This kit included stone points for weapons, knives for cutting meat, and tools for scraping animal skins. Because of these weapons, experts first assumed the skeleton was male. However, modern lab tests on the bones and proteins hidden inside the teeth proved without a doubt that this elite hunter was actually a teenage girl. This incredible find pushed scientists to re-examine other ancient graves across the Americas. They realized that up to half of all early big game hunters were actually women. Tutankhamun's space dagger.
Go woman. Not just men had to hunt. Yeah. All right. I was gonna make a joke, and then I decided not to. And I still think I'm gonna refrain from making the joke. So we'll just keep going.
Before the Iron Age began around 1200 BC, historians thought it was impossible for ancient people to have advanced iron weapons. Because King Tut died more than 100 years before that time, experts assumed the famous Egyptian pharaoh only had tools made of softer bronze. Scientists in the 1920s took a closer look at a beautifully decorated iron dagger found strapped to the young king's mummified leg, and they took it with them. Then, in 2016, researchers used a special tool called an X-ray fluorescent spectrometer. This device shoots safe X-rays at an object to reveal exactly what chemicals are inside without breaking or scratching the ancient artifact. The test results were completely unexpected. The metal blade contained very specific high amounts of nickel and cobalt. This unique chemical recipe perfectly matches the makeup of rocks that fall from space. This proved that ancient Egyptians did not melt their iron from the earth. Instead, they carefully gathered and hammered incredibly rare weapons out of meteorites, literally fighting with metal that fell from the sky. Al-Jazari.
I'm so... Egyptians were fighting with space rocks? Space metal? That's crazy. Also, I see something that's coming up. The Hobbit human species is real. I wish, if it's real, I wish I was a Hobbit. Anyways, continue on.
Robots.
Wait, robots?
Many people grew up believing that the invention of robots and programmable machines was a strictly modern achievement that started in Europe during the 1700s. However, historians translated a fascinating 13th century manuscript called the Book of Knowledge of Ingenious Mechanical Devices. Written in 1206 by an inventor named Al-Jazari, the book revealed a world of technology that was centuries ahead of its time. Al-Jazari created the world's first programmable automaton, which was a robotic musical band that sat on a boat. By moving pegs on a rotating drum, the owner could actually change the rhythm and patterns the drum-playing robot would perform. He also engineered incredibly complex water clocks and pumps that used pistons and crankshafts, which are the same parts found in modern car engines today. This reality proves that Al-Jazari was building sophisticated robots 500 years before similar technology appeared in the West.
That's actually really cool. I like that one.
The Pirate's Truth. Pirates in the 1700s are almost always shown in movies as chaotic villains who used violence to control their ships. People picture brutal captains ruling with an iron fist. This image started to change in 1984 when explorers found the wreck of the Whydah Galley. It is the only confirmed pirate ship from the golden age of piracy ever recovered. Along with written documents called pirate codes, the artifacts found on the ocean floor told a completely different story. These famous outlaws were actually early pioneers of modern democracy. The documents proved that pirate crews held elections to vote for their captains and could vote to replace them at any time. They even set up early forms of health insurance that paid out specific amounts of gold to anyone who lost an arm or an eye. The crew shared their stolen wealth almost equally among themselves. Most surprisingly, they welcomed freed African slaves as equal members with full voting rights. Of course, specific rules changed from crew to crew. The Hobbit human species.
Okay. That one is very interesting. I kind of figured pirates weren't actually like that, but the fact that they have democracy and healthcare is pretty interesting. All right. The Hobbit human species. Let's see what this one's about. I'm excited.
For a long time, scientists believed human evolution was a simple, straight path where our bodies and brains just kept getting bigger. That idea was completely turned upside down in 2003 on the Indonesian island of Flores. Inside a deep cave, researchers discovered the skeletons of incredibly small ancient people who stood only about 3.5 feet tall. Because of their tiny size, they were quickly nicknamed hobbits. These remains belong to a distinct miniature species we now call Homo floresiensis, a human species that lived at the same time as Neanderthals and modern humans. What shocked experts the most was that these tiny humans had brains about the size of a chimpanzee, yet they crafted advanced stone tools. Viking sunstones.
Okay, so hobbits weren't really even that interesting. They were just dwarfs that existed when Neanderthals existed. Speaking of dwarfs, I learned a new fact about dwarfs the other day. So the seven dwarfs from Snow White? Yeah, they ain't got shit on another group of seven dwarfs that I just learned about. The seven dwarfs of Auschwitz. Yep. There's a dwarf family that was moving to Romania or from Romania during the Holocaust. I don't remember which, but they were a Jewish family. So they got snatched up, taken to the camps, and it was a family of seven. So there were, in fact, seven dwarfs in Auschwitz. Take that, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Anyways, moving on.
In the ancient Norse sagas, Viking sailors often talked about a magical sunstone that allowed them to find the sun even when the sky was thick with clouds or fog. For a long time, historians and scientists assumed these stones were just myths or part of a legend. They believed the Vikings only navigated by looking at landmarks or the stars. However, this old assumption was challenged in 2011 when a piece of a crystal called Iceland spar was found in a 16th century shipwreck. Scientists realized that this stone has a very special physical property that allows it to polarize light. When you look through the crystal, it splits the light into two separate beams. By rotating the stone until both beams look exactly the same brightness, a navigator can pinpoint the exact position of the sun, even if it is hidden behind heavy clouds or is already dropped below the horizon. Modern experiments prove that these crystals work with incredible accuracy. While we don't have 100% proof that they actually use them, the fact that they talked about them in their sagas and the fact that they actually work might point towards that theory.
I did know about that one. I learned about that one from Dr. Stone. Very interesting stuff there. Oh, ancient Greece has got a fucking computer? What the hell? Alright, let's talk about the Roman Empire's ignorance.
Empire's ignorance. For many years, experts thought that reading and writing in the ancient Roman world were skills only important people had. It seemed like important records were only ever carved into heavy stone monuments or written on an expensive early form of paper called papyrus. That idea changed completely in 1973 during an excavation at a Roman military fort near Hadrian's Wall in Britain. While digging in soggy mud that kept out the air and perfectly preserved buried items, archaeologists uncovered hundreds of thin, postcard-sized scraps of wood. These wooden pieces were covered in ink and acted just like modern text messages. They were filled with everyday chatter, including basic supply lists, complaints about the rainy British weather, desperate requests for more beer, and even a birthday party invitation written by a military commander's wife.
What the hell? Okay.
Ancient Greece's computer. We often picture ancient Greece as a time long before complex machines were ever invented.
Right.
Experts assumed that complicated gear technology did not appear until European clockmakers created it in the 1300s. That entire belief fell apart starting in 1901, when sponge divers exploring a sunken Roman ship off the coast of Greece found a heavily crusted lump of bronze. It looked like an ordinary green rock for decades until modern scientists finally looked inside it using X-rays and CT scans. Hidden beneath the crust was an incredibly advanced ancient computer. It contained more than 30 interlocking metal gears working perfectly together. Known as the Antikythera mechanism, this brilliant device was, incredibly enough, the first analog computer. It was used to calculate the exact movements of the stars, predict eclipses, and even track the schedule of early athletic games. This single artifact proved the ancient Greeks possessed engineering abilities that were completely lost to history for over 1,000 years.
That's very cool, actually.
The caveman artists. When we imagine early humans painting animals on cave walls, we almost always picture male hunters or tribal leaders telling stories about their successful hunts. This was challenged by a scientist named Dean Snow. He decided to study the hand stencils that ancient people left behind in different caves across France and Spain. By looking at these handprints, he used a clever method involving the length of the index finger compared to the ring finger. Because men and women usually have different finger lengths, he could figure out the sex of the painters. To everyone's surprise, the measurements proved that 75% of the cave artists might have actually been women. Lonso Meadows. History books used to teach that Christopher...
Okay, wait. Women have different finger setup for these fingers? Is that what you're telling me? That hey, good for you. You know, I always love learning something new every day. Some sciencey new stuff every day. I like that. Maybe Daveology name's really living up to his name now. Learning about science stuff. Fun.
Columbus was the very first European to reach the Americas when he sailed across the ocean in 1492. For hundreds of years, people believed that no one from Europe had stepped foot on the continent before that famous voyage. This changed in 1960 when a Norwegian explorer named Helge Ingstad and his wife, Anne Stein Ingstad, began digging at a coastal site in Newfoundland, Canada. They uncovered the remains of a village that looked nothing like the local indigenous buildings. Instead, they found the foundations of timber-framed houses covered in sod and even tools used for making iron. These ruins perfectly matched the style of homes built by the Vikings. This discovery proved that groups of Norse travelers, likely led by Leif Erikson, had successfully reached and settled in North America nearly 500 years before Columbus was even born.
Columbus didn't even discover the Americas, man. L on Columbus. I'm sure you're still the first one to travel around the whole world, but hey, you missed out on America by 500 years, dude.
Gladiators. If you were to imagine a Roman gladiator's diet, you'd likely picture him being a carnivore. We also often imagine them as disposable slaves, forced into bloody battles where only one person left the arena alive. This changed in 1993 when archaeologists found a large graveyard in Ephesus, which is in modern-day Turkey, containing the bones of over 60 fighters. Scientists studied the chemicals inside these bones and discovered that gladiators were actually strict vegetarians. They ate so much barley and beans that Romans called them barley men. This high carbohydrate diet gave them a thick layer of fat just under their skin, which acted like a natural shield to protect their vital organs from shallow sword cuts. The bones also showed signs of expert medical care that had healed perfectly over time. Because training a fighter was so expensive for the owners, they rarely wanted them to die in the ring. Instead of being disposable, they were highly valued athletes who often lived much longer than movies suggest.
Okay.
Pets as tools. Most people assume that ancient humans only kept animals for practical reasons like hunting or guarding. Life was harsh, so people believed there was no room for pets kept just for companionship. A discovery in Germany changed this, though. Archaeologists found the 14,000-year-old remains of a puppy buried with incredible care next to a man and a woman. The grave was sprinkled with red powder, a special sign of respect. When modern animal doctors studied the puppy's bones, they found something amazing. The young dog had caught a severe virus that causes terrible sickness. Because of this illness, the puppy would have been completely useless for working. It required constant care and hand feeding just to survive as long as it did. The fact that these ancient people spent so much energy nursing a sick animal proves they loved it and didn't just need it for practical reasons. Stone Age fashion. Many people think of Stone Age humans as messy hunters wearing nothing but dirty brown animal skins. We often think of them as people who did not care about their appearance because they were too busy trying to survive in a harsh world. However, in 2009, when archaeologists were exploring the Zudzuana cave in the country of Georgia, they found tiny microscopic plant fibers that were 30,000 years old. These fibers were made of flax, which is a plant that humans still use today to make soft linen fabric. When scientists looked closer, they realized these fibers had been spun and knotted into cloth. Most surprisingly, they discovered that the fibers were dyed in bright colors like pink, turquoise blue, and deep black. This likely proves that early humans were not just wrapped in raw furs. They might have actually known how to make tailored, colorful clothes.
Okay, they got some fashion.
Babies. It is a famous story that ancient Spartans threw weak babies into a deep pit to keep their warrior society strong. People believed for centuries that city elders inspected every newborn and tossed the rejected ones into a terrifying gorge called the Kaiadas. This dramatic legend was finally put to the test in 2007. Scientists from Greece decided to dig into the real Kaiadas chasm to see what was at the bottom. They spent months pulling up hundreds of old bones to study them in a modern lab. Out of all the skeletons they examined, there was not a single baby bone. Instead, every piece belonged to grown men between the ages of 18 and 35. It turns out the terrifying pit was just an execution spot for adult criminals, prisoners, and traitors. The famous tale of tossing infants was actually a myth spread much later by a writer named Plutarch. Birka grave BJ581 DNA. For over 100 years, whenever archaeologists found a Viking grave filled with swords, axes, and shields, they automatically assumed the person inside was a man. In 1878, they found a grave in a Swedish town called Birka. The person buried there was surrounded by powerful weapons and even a tactical board game, which was a set of pieces used to plan battle moves. Because of these items, historians called this person the ultimate Viking warrior and assumed he was a great male leader. Everything changed in 2017 when scientists decided to test the DNA. To their absolute surprise, the tests proved that this high-ranking commander was actually a woman. This discovery completely shattered the old idea that only men could be military leaders in Viking society. It showed that the legendary shield maidens from ancient stories were not just make-believe characters. Instead, women could actually be elite warriors and tactical experts who led others into battle.
Okay.
Civilization required
W for the woman. Civilization requires war. Okay, let's see what this was about.
A popular idea is that as soon as humans build big cities and gather wealth, they must immediately create armies to protect themselves. We often assume that war and violence are a sort of unavoidable price people pay for living in an organized society. This way of thinking, though, was challenged when researchers began exploring the Indus Valley civilization in modern-day Pakistan and India. They discovered massive ancient cities like Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa that were incredibly advanced for their time. These places had streets laid out in perfect straight lines and even featured indoor plumbing with toilets that flushed. Even though this was the largest and most successful civilization of its era, archaeologists have found almost no weapons meant for war after 100 years of digging. There are no monuments of kings bragging about winning battles and no signs of a military. Dirty Vikings. Most people
interesting. I'm gonna be honest, I zoned out on that one. But all I heard was it was a myth. No war needed for civilizations. Okay. What's this about dirty Vikings?
Imagine Vikings as messy and smelly warriors who never bothered to wash. We often think of them as mud-covered people with tangled hair and dirty clothes. This popular image was proven wrong by looking at ancient Viking graves and reading old travel journals. When experts dig up these burial sites, the things they find most often are not actually swords or axes. Instead, they find tools for staying clean, like beautifully carved combs, small tweezers, and ear spoons used to remove earwax. These finds show that Vikings were actually some of the cleanest people of their time. Historical records tell us they bathed at least once every week, which was much more often than other groups living in Europe back then. They also changed their clothes frequently and styled their hair with care. This focus on being clean made them so popular with local women in places like England that the local men actually became jealous. Neanderthals cuisine. Many people think that ancient humans and Neanderthals mainly just ate meat. Recently, though, in 2022, scientists used electron microscopes to study burnt food scraps. These remains were up to 70,000 years old. To their surprise, the researchers found that these scraps were actually one of the oldest flatbreads and pancakes ever discovered. It turns out that Neanderthals were very skilled chefs. They gathered wild wheat, lentils, and seeds, then soaked and crushed them to get rid of bitter flavors. They even seasoned their food before baking it over a fire.
Wait.
The Bonham-Pack mural.
Dude, the Neanderthals had pancakes? That's what's up. What's the Neanderthal pancake look like, though? There's no way they made flour. Right? How do you make... I don't even know how to make flour. I'm dumber than a Neanderthal. What the hell? Okay.
For many years, scholars believed the ancient Maya were a peaceful society of people who just specialized in astronomy and philosophy. They were often compared to the Aztecs, who were known for being very warlike, but the Maya were thought to be much more gentle and calm. In 1946, however, something changed. Local people in Mexico led researchers to hidden temples deep in the jungle, and inside these buildings, they found amazing, bright paintings that covered the walls from the floor to the ceiling. Instead of peaceful scenes, the paintings showed very violent images of battles, the torture of prisoners, and rituals involving blood. This discovery showed that the Maya were actually fierce warriors who were often at war with each other. It proved that their different cities were constantly competing for power and land. This changed our entire understanding of how Maya society worked, showing they were just as complex and sometimes as violent as the Aztecs and other famous ancient empires. Deir el-Medina and Giza Workers' Village.
So everyone's a violent, power-hungry civilization back then. James Benny, what's up? What's going on? All right, last one, and then we can play our demo. We're very excited for.
Stories and movies often show thousands of slaves being forced to build the Egyptian pyramids. The common idea for generations was that mistreated workers moved giant stones under a hot sun with no choice and no pay. This was challenged when archaeologists explored sites like Deir el-Medina and a special village near the pyramids at Giza. They uncovered a world of houses, bakeries, and even burial sites belonging to the people who actually did the work. These excavations proved that the builders were not slaves, but expert workers who were very good at their jobs. They lived in organized towns with their families and were paid for their hard work with regular supplies of food, clothing, and even beer. Scientists found records of workers taking sick days when they were unwell and evidence that they received medical care for their injuries. There is even proof that they went on strike to demand better food when their pay was late. If you wanted to...
So, Egyptians building the pyramids had sick days. It wasn't slaves. Honestly, I was kind of on the train that it was aliens that built the pyramids. All right, that was some cool, interesting history facts there.